As Eric said, we have this track record at just about anywhere I work. Ends up getting taken over at some point in time. I don't know whether that's me or just circumstances. Balmoral, after all the wonderful talk about silver, we're going to talk about a little bit of gold here. In particular, we're going to talk about high-grade Canadian gold, and that's always a wonderful topic. You'll have an opportunity to hear twice today about high-grade gold projects in the Abitibi region from ourselves and Cartier. And I think the fact that there's 2 of us here out of 9 companies speaks volumes about the area and the potential we see and that the investors see in this space. Our team are all experienced veterans. Claude did mention MAG. We did have the good fortune of being part of the original founding of MAG Silver, and Dan McGinnis, who obviously ran MAG for a number of years, is our lead director. All of the bodies here are experienced bodies. They've all had success in and of their own rights, have come together to work on this exploration effort in the Abitibi region. Just a couple of quick charts, just to remind everybody why you actually do invest in exploration companies and why even investing in exploration companies in sideways to down markets can be a really good idea if you pick the right ones. This is West Timmins. This was our former day job. And out of the bottom in 2008, less than 9 months, and you're gone, and everybody goes home very, very happy with a nice return on a gold discovery. That discovery is actually made 2 years prior. Sometimes it takes the market a little bit of time to recognize the significance of a discovery, but the run up there very, very strong. As Eric mentioned, this for Balmoral in 2014, this off the back of our nickel discovery, which now sits as effectively a free call on the nickel market behind the Martiniere Gold Project. But again, in a pretty soft market, a very strong return for our shareholders in that particular case. We operate in the province of Quebec and solely in the province of Quebec, and there's a lot of good reasons to be there. Probably first and foremost is they actually pay us to be there. So for every hard dollar that we put into exploration in the ground, they refund us 28.5%, which allows your dollars that you invest in a company like Balmoral to go considerably further than they do in any other jurisdiction. Also a place where it takes me 3 weeks to get a drill permit. Not 3 months, not 3 years, but 3 weeks. We have certainty of title. We have exceptional First Nations partners in this part of Quebec. We work with the Grand Council of the Cree. This is a group that actually promotes and helps to sponsor mineral exploration projects and mineral development projects rather than try and stop them as we've seen in other parts of the country. And the Quebec government is strongly supportive. As a matter of fact, it has helped recently for us fund some upgrades in the local road network. We've seen a number of major projects come online in the province of Quebec, so you do have this certainty that if you find it, you're going to be allowed to build it, and actually you're probably going to get some help along the way from the government. We work in the Abitibi Greenstone Belt. This is the second largest accumulation on the planet of high-grade gold deposits. We've been mining high-grade gold in this part of the Canadian Shield for over 100 years. There's a long history, and thus it's an area where your costs are very well understood, where there's an extremely good and skilled labor force, where you have a very clear understanding of what makes a mine and what does not make a mine. And for that reason, it's a place that people want to be. It's a place that major and intermediate producers want to set up operations. And thus, for junior explorers like ourselves, it's a wonderful place to be because you can become the next domino. And we recently saw a similar high-grade gold project in the Abitibi region with Integra get tumbled over by El Dorado, who's a new entry into the belt. And become the latest domino on our slide. We change these on a fairly regular basis given the amount of M&A activity. M&A activity obviously for yourselves as investors into the junior exploration space is quite frequently the best return on investment because typically you've had a run with the discovery, with the expansion of the asset, and then you get the quote-unquote close and the opportunity to cash in on your investment or to carry on with the incoming company So as an explorer, this is obviously one of the things we looked at when we set up shop back in the Abitibi after having sold West Timmins. We also like to work in areas where there are mines, there are active mines, and thus you have that infrastructure already built out for you in the region. These are our neighbors. Just across off the western end of our property package, we have the largest gold mine in Canada with Detour. Massive open pit operation, relatively low grade at 0.8 grams, and we'll contrast that with the average grade of our Martin Project, which is sitting closer to 8 grams, so about 10 times higher. Just 45 kilometers south of us and accessible on the existing road network is Hecla's Casa Berardi operation. All Casa Berardi does is print profits year after year after year. It's a high-grade underground operation, along with a couple of small starter pits. And we see a lot of similarities between what we're discovering and outlining at Martin and that Casa Berardi system. And on the base metal front, the other neighbor is Glencore, and they operate the Matagami camp just off the eastern end of our property. And that has some bearing, obviously, with Glencore owning a nickel smelter in Canada as well, to our nickel discovery at Grisette. On the infrastructure front, the infrastructure in the area is very good. We drive into the project. It's about a 3-hour drive out of Val-d'Or. It's remote enough to be non-controversial when it comes to future development. It's close enough that we can drive into the project and thus supply very cheaply. The main power grid sits just 17 kilometers south of us. And importantly, we own 100% of the project. We're not beholden to anybody. We have nothing that drives us other than finding more gold and trying to make our shareholders a healthy return on their investments. We also own a couple of projects to the south, 810, which we picked up last year, which is a pure grassroots gold exploration project, and N2, which hosts a historic reserve of just over 1 million ounces sitting adjacent to a small producer called Veza down further to the south on the Casa Berardi structure. You'll notice the thick black lines that run across the map. Those are the major fault structures. Those fault structures are really key. Those are effectively the pipeline that brings the gold into the local environment, and it's along these structures that you need to be located, usually within 2 to 4 kilometers if you actually want to find a deposit of significant size, and that holds throughout the Abitibi region. As a matter of fact, it holds true throughout most of the gold greenstone belts globally. So we'll look at Martin. Martin sits about halfway through our land package. It's our current focus. And it effectively is a project that is in resource delineation at this stage. So the quote-unquote discovery risk is largely out of it. It's now a question of how big, how many ounces, and what are the economics associated with those ounces. On a geological basis, it really sits between 2 major regional east-west structures, and effectively the movement on those structures cracks the ground open, allows the gold-bearing fluids in, likely from that southern pipeline. That's that regional fault system. There are a number of deposits, very similar to what you would see in a number of the producing mines in the Abitibi. We're not talking about one single entity. We're actually talking here about 4 deposits and about 15 other zones of mineralization within the greater Martin system. And the system and the deposits all remain open in all directions. As you can see on that slide, there's not a whole lot of other development in this region, nor is there a whole lot of exploration in this region, which is excellent for us, which means the system is wide open to continue to grow. The summer 2017 drill program literally commenced on the weekend. That's a 25,000 plus meter program that adds to about a little over 12,000 meters we did earlier this summer, or this spring. We still have results pending from that spring program, so they'll pretty much dovetail nicely with results that start filling up your inbox from the summer program here shortly. I think the other significant thing about Martin, it's not a retread. This isn't a project that survived the last cycle and didn't make it into production when gold was $1,500 to $1,900. This is a discovery that actually started to emerge in 2011, and actually the Bug Lake, the main part of the discovery, wasn't found until 2014. Therefore, it's a new series of discoveries that are still growing and not something that's had a rehash. 2 mineralized trends here in total, almost 3.5 kilometers of near surface strike length, and now well over 2 kilometers of down plunge strike extent as well. Again, 100% owned. All the deposits come to the bedrock surface. One thing you can see here is there's not a whole lot of bedrock sticking out of the ground. That is the opportunity up here. As part of the reason that we came into this belt is that it's not the, I guess, the easiest place to explore. It's an area with extensive overburden cover, which means the prospector who has found the bulk of the major deposits in the Abitibi region really can't find anything out in this area. I actually have a very lovely bottle of scotch sitting on my shelf for the first of my employees who drags in a gold-bearing sample from surface here. I think that's going to go from a 12-year probably to a 20 before anybody finds one. So it's been sitting there for 5 years, and I suspect it'll sit there a little longer. So everything's completely covered, but it's not overly thick cover. It's just a complete mantle that hides the deposits, allows us to bring in high-tech applications on the geophysical and geochemical front to make the discoveries, and we're showing that that does in fact work very much like it worked for us in the Timmins camp to make the discoveries to the south that led to the sale of West Timmins. 90% of our drilling to date has been very shallow, basically surface down to 300 vertical meters, but we have now intersected the deposits down to 750 vertical meters, and they're all open beyond that. Excuse me. Keep the geology fairly simple. Basically, on the right-hand side of your slide, you can see that the Bug Lake gold deposits sit along a trend which separates two geological domains. This is an early formed fault, multiply reactivated, so we actually see multiple pulses of gold mineralization into that structure, which typically leads to the high grades. We will see grades in here up to almost 9,000 grams of gold in individual samples along that Bug Lake trend. Trend shows great continuity. This is basically just stripping off the overburden and showing you the heat map for the gold zones. So we see basically three primary elements there. We see the Bug North deposit and Bug South deposit. Those are separated by about a late fault that offsets them by about 75 meters, but effectively they're one and the same. And then deeper, we have what we call the lower steep, much less drilling on the lower steep, largely because it's deeper. All of the zones remain open. All of the zones plunge down to the southern, to the lower part of the slide as they go to depth. And what results is the fact that they actually line up as we go deeper into the ground, which makes for a nice, pleasant mining scenario as we go forward. 50% of the holes that we have drilled on the property to date, not just into the zones, but on the whole property as a whole, have returned assays in excess of 10 grams per ton, so about a third of an ounce. And that's the hallmark of a very good high-quality gold system, high-grade gold system. These slides are relatively noisy, but I think they emphasize the point that there is in all cases, what we typically see is a broad halo of gold mineralization with a high-grade core. And again, this is not atypical of the Abitibi. This is what we expect up here. Pretty much vertical orientations to the zones, and that high-grade core there sitting at the heart of the system. The broader halo, in the case of the Martinair and the Bug Lake systems, likely does give us functionality over the top 150 to 200 meters to start life as a low-cost open pit operation, and then ramp down onto the high grade as we go deeper into the system. As I said earlier, we've now intersected gold mineralization here down to about 750 vertical meters. Again, that isn't a surprise out here either. The nearby operation at Hecla is now mining down at 1,200 and has intersected gold mineralization to 1,500 vertical meters. That's pretty typical of the Abitibi. The down plunge extent tends to be considerably greater for the individual ore bodies than the along strike extent. As you can see there, everything remains open, nothing's closed off. And as we're backing out to drill a little deeper, we're making new discoveries, and the horsefly that's shown here is one of those. Once again, broad halo, lower grade mineralization, high grade core, and again, a consistent feature of almost every zone of mineralization we've seen on the property to date, which I think there are now about 21 that we look at. This is just basically to show you that high-grade core intact. That's the plunge line. That's that southerly plunge line. We see this in all of the zones. And this, as you can see here, this one remains open down to depth. But that isn't all that Balmoral is. That is basically 8 square kilometers out of about 750 square kilometers that we now control along the detour trend. So we are explorers by nature, explorers by desire. And this year we'll see us run our first significant exploration program outside of the Martinair and Grisette deposits since about 2014. And that program led to the nickel discovery at Grisette. So for the first time in quite a while, we'll get back to doing what we love to do and look to make additional discoveries in the belt. So we will be drilling 25 to 30 holes on exploration targets outside of the main system, in addition to about 25,000 meters within the main Martinair gold system as we continue to delineate that and get it ready for its initial resource. That's exciting for our shareholders, that's exciting for my geologists, and it's exciting for me because we always love new things. One of those targets, one of those areas that will see a great deal of exploration this summer is what we call Detour East. This is about 40 kilometers away from Martinair. And it's a property where in the afternoons, on a pleasant sunny afternoon, when the bugs aren't too thick in your face, you can see the dust cloud rise as Detour blasts away to liberate gold across the border. So it's shadow of the head frame, or shadow of the open pit, in this case, exploration. And it will focus on what is now a 13-kilometer long trend of drill-indicated gold discoveries on the southern part of the property, and on a large target, about a 5-kilometer long target in the very northeast corner of the property. So we will be drilling a number of holes out here this summer. Those targets, in some cases, have been ready to go for a couple of years. We've just been preoccupied with getting the delineation work done at Grisette and at Martinair. So we're excited to get back to doing this work, and so look for these results to you probably in the early part of August. And hopefully we have another golden hammer waiting for us from the Quebec discovery of the year. Did mention that we do have a nickel deposit. I don't come to Zurich ever to talk about nickel. I usually come here to talk about gold. But we do have a nickel deposit. Right now, with the soft nature of the nickel market, it does sit basically as a free future call within the company on the nickel market. It's a fairly rare asset. It's a nickel sulfide deposit with beautifully simple metallurgy. They're usually very complex. This one is extraordinarily simple. It's an open-ended deposit. We've drilled it down to 500 vertical meters. It remains open below that. It has large degree of scalability to higher nickel prices. But at the moment, I will tell you very frankly that at 420, 430 nickel, wherever we are at the moment, it doesn't have economics. That makes it right on par with about 60% of the nickel space that's producing right now. Nickel market obviously very, very soft. However, on a go-forward basis, if you're any of the high-tech applications that you want to talk about, that everybody loves to talk about, their lithium and their cobalt, et cetera, those all require nickel from sulfide sources, not laterite sources, to make them function. So we actually get to tuck this away and deal with it on our own terms and at the proper time. This is not an asset we would consider moving at this point. We have tenure on it. We own it for the next 20 years without having to spend another dime on it. So we can afford to be patient with it and look to extract value for the shareholders at the right moment in time. So what are you looking for from Balmoral in the near future? You're actually right now, you're looking for the announcement of the drill program. I'll tell you it's underway, and you'll see the announcement early next week. You're looking for the final results out of the spring program, and then you're looking for a bunch of results as we continue to expand the Bug Lake deposits over the course of the summer. I think if I'm keying you into what to look for that high-grade core to stay intact. That's really, as we go deeper, that's really the critical part. We're looking for new discoveries in that Martinair system. We have not yet run a drill program at Martinair and not made at least 1 or 2 new discoveries proximal to the main gold-bearing trends. So it's a gold system that still continues to expand. You're looking for us to probably deliver a resource to you on this towards the end of the year. It'll be a Q4 piece of work. We're looking for new discoveries because that's what we're known for, that's what we do. In particular, areas on Detour East that I talked about, the Finger Lake area that I didn't talk about, which is just to the north of the Martinair system and would actually have some bearing on the future development at Martinair. This is about a 5-kilometer long trend now that we've begun to make a series of discoveries on. They've been relatively quiet while we work out exactly what we've got on our hands. You'll see the first testing of the 810 property probably later in the year. That's a property down to the south of the main trend. And we may actually return to doing some work at N2, given the size of the historic resource there, later in the year, early into 2018. That summer program underway now. At Grisette will remain fairly quiet. That's, as I said earlier, The final hole we drilled in 2015, this was basically our key to shut down the program, was 10.5% nickel over 7.5 meters. That's a pretty good hole. And we went backward on the day that we announced it as the nickel market was falling apart. That pretty much tells you what you need to do as a CEO. So we did, but that sits there. Obviously, the next time the drills rev up at Grisette, that's where it goes, right there. There's district scale exploration potential there, and interestingly, around that nickel-bearing sequence, there are a number of gold discoveries we made while drilling the nickel out. That's a situation, this nickel-gold pairing, that's very similar to the Kambalda region in Australia, which hosts a number of both nickel and gold mines. So at some point we do need to return to the gold exploration out there. I don't know that we'll necessarily do that this summer, but we do have things like 200-gram gold discovery sitting there for us to go play with. So those are pretty exciting things to be sitting sort of quote-unquote back shelf inside the company. No warrants outstanding on the company. All the options are internal. About $7 million in working capital here. What I talked about today was about a $5 million program. So unfortunately, I can't tell you, sit up here and tell you I won't finance. I'm an explorer. I do finance. But we typically do one a year. And that's really to put away the money for next year. So 2017, what I talked about today, already fully financed. At some point, we'll book the money for 2018 and move forward from there. Market cap is about $85 million at the current time, so there obviously you can see that there's some value built in there for the gold asset. And our strength really is in our retail and shareholder base and in our relationships, and it always has been that way. So I thank you for your attention today. I hope you have a great day with the rest of the companies here, and thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Darin. Great presentation. Yes, big round of applause.